Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Arcadia High School Creative Musical Arts and Sciences program's weekly podcast. My name is Richard Maxwell, and I am here on this lovely September 8th with Bonham and Jaden and Elias and Haley and Jesus. And we may be getting joined by a few other folks as well as we go, but um, we are here today. The podcasts, which you can find, by the way, replays of the concerts, the podcasts, our recording archive, everything else. You can find all of that at arcadiacmas.com. And we very much appreciate everyone who comes out and listens and supports all these students in the program, especially during this alternative learning methods that we are currently doing, which are actually, I got to be honest with you, going really, really well. I've been so impressed with 4 of the 5 people in today's podcast. I'm kidding. It's really only 3. It might even really just be 2 of you. I'm not even sure. No, the whole program really has been quite spectacular. And it's just really awesome. There's a lot of great music coming out. There's a lot of cool things that are available from these students, and I'm kind of continually blown away at the acknowledgement of the frustration that the online learning situation creates, but how they just kind of make stuff work anyway. And that to me is hugely, I know it sounds like a broken record because I say it all the time, but it really is. It seems to be almost unique in some respects. I talk to a lot of people who have very different experiences, and it's not that their kids aren't wonderful, and it's not that they're not doing a great job, but there seems to be a lot more pulling of teeth in some respects. We don't have that. It's just awesome. So anyway, what I wanted to talk to you all about today, I had a question I wanted to pose to you as a group. So last week we were talking, and I know a couple of you were on that episode, and even if you weren't, it's totally fine. We were talking last week about this notion of what inspires people to be creative, or what gets you sort of interested in, I want to go make that thing. And we can touch on that again because I know some of you weren't part of that and you may have some you want to share, but I kind of was curious today. I wanted to go the other direction. I was curious, like, when you are in the midst of working on something that you are, let's say, really invested in, either because you really like the idea or you're working with people that you enjoy working with, there's something about it that you feel very driven to get whatever it is out to the world in whatever format it's going to take, live or as a recording or a video or whatever it is. So my question is, what happens and how do you deal with those moments that invariably seem to come up where you hit a wall, where something is like maybe expected, maybe unexpected, and you're like, this thing that I thought was going to go in one direction, it's not so much that it's not going in a different direction, it's that it feels like it's not going. Like, what do you do when the inspiration runs out? Let me put it that way. What do you think? Like, what's your process when the you may still feel in your gut that it's supposed to work, but it's just not. What do you?
I personally just give it time. Like, that's honestly the best way to get through things. Like, if you're really invested in this project, you'll probably just be doing it nonstop and like doing it every day or pretty close to. But then after that, it gets repetitive, and I think that's where people get in like a loop or in a rut.
Okay.
So if you give it time, it gives your brain to like chill out, relax, and then it starts up new little thoughts. Like, I don't know how to explain it. I don't know. That's just what I do, especially when I have like artist or writer's block.
Okay.
Yeah, just putting stuff away and then coming back to it, especially if you've been working on it for a long time. The only problem that I've had with that is I kind of just forget about it, and then like a year later I come back and I'm like, oh, I got this thing. I don't remember what I was doing with it. But
Okay, hold on to that thought a second, because I saw Elias unmuted here and had something to contribute to the original question.
Well, no, yeah, that's basically what Jaden and Bon were saying. When I like feel like something isn't going anywhere or it doesn't sound quite right, I'll just give it like a week and come back to it. But I, like Bonham was saying, so I don't forget about it, I do like write down, like, I'll come back to this like 3 days later or 7 days later or whatever. So it's
That was kind of my question. And actually, Bonham, if you can turn that gain up just a tiny bit, and Jaden, maybe you as well, just on your
Okay.
mic a little bit. I don't know if we all sound out of balance from each other. One of the problems with these remote sessions is it's hard to quite know who's at what level. But so okay, and certainly Haley and Jesus, if you want to chime in as well. But just real quick, do you have like I've known people who ascribe to the same idea of, okay, if it's not working, you kind of get to a point where you're like, we're just going in circles and this is wasting time and creative energy. I'm going to set it aside. But I know some people that will go further and they will detach themselves from, like, they'll be like, okay, I'm just going to take a break. And then I know other people that are like, you know what, this one's not working as much as I wanted to, but I've got literally like 10 others over here that I'm also actively pursuing at the same time. And there's like a rotational, like, do you have a sense of like, where's your, like, again, where's your process on like, okay, we're going to set it aside? What does that mean?
The rotational thing is like, I usually have at least 2 or 3 or maybe 4 things.
Okay.
And it's kind of just prioritizing what needs to get done. Like, for example, I do have, like demos I need to track for my band and things I'm doing with other people that I need to get that done. That's like more of a job where, and then
Okay.
like same thing with like the or I wouldn't say it's a job because it's still like creative and I don't have like a deadline or a record label I have to keep up with or anything like that. But
Not yet. You
it's
don't.
very much like,
That's probably coming in your life, though,
not
dude.
yet. Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure that's
I
coming
very
in your
much
life.
do have to like prioritize some things over others when it comes to like projects. So sometimes end up really just getting lost in like my more passion project
Okay.
side of
So
things. So
okay.
I do need to like,
So expand a little bit more there, because I'm curious. Like, do you, and maybe this is something you've never considered, I don't know, maybe you think about it a lot. Do you feel like there are certain things that you inherently would, I'm going to say this, you're going to have to forgive me, it's a Friday afternoon, long week, we're all kind of out of it, so I'm not going to use the best terms here. Are there projects where the circumstances surrounding them cause you to, for want of a better phrase, try harder? Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like you're
especially, oh yeah, oh yeah. There's sometimes, yeah, depending on what we're doing, if for example, when we were in CMAS, um knowing that the time we had there was so limited because we only have like 45-minute class periods, and I get into class, you gotta wait like 5-10 minutes for class settle down, Max will tell thing, go through a lesson or something if he does, and then I gotta go and eat, and I gotta set up on all the drum stuff, and I gotta wait for George to set up the. So I don't have to
there's
set up
one
the
of those
drums, but
steps we could
how
probably
wait a
is.
minute.
we could probably reorganize your schedule a little bit to save a little bit of time.
Priorities.
One of those steps.
But-
We'll leave it as a
but
mystery to which one, but I'm just saying.
Okay. I'm just saying there's like so many things that you have to do, and then all of a sudden when you get to track, you're like, oh, we have 10 minutes left.
Right.
Because
Sure.
that's just the nature of live recording. So I always know when I'm going into CMAS to record something, if I get the chance to, like, I get it a week before, and I like, spend a lot of time at home studying it so I can get it done in one take, because that's really
Gotcha.
all we have time for.
Right. Something that we're, and
so
then
like
that's not fair to
and then
you
if I'm getting
guys.
paid
We're working
for
on
it
that.
too.
Yeah.
If I'm getting paid for it too, and I have a deadline to meet, especially if I'm getting paid for it to do it for somebody else's project or just in general,
Right.
I will put in a lot more effort compared to something like, I don't know, if I'm doing a cover on my YouTube channel.
Mhm.
Like, I feel like for myself, I actually cheat myself out a lot. And I'm just like, I'll be lazy, like just do this with like no plugins. I'll be chilling. And then then like I go and do stuff for other people, and I'm like, oh my God, I need to go borrow my friend's 16 channel mixer, and I need to go get all this special crazy stuff, and then I need to pay a guy to mix it for me before I send it out to the person. Like, I try like extra hard. If
right.
I'm
well, and
working
some
for
of that,
other
I mean, but some
people.
of that could be circumstance. Like, okay, so Haley, I'm gonna ask you, because I this happened to you. I know I witnessed it happen. I think it was 3 weeks ago. You're like, I'm gonna play the show, and so we set up. You're getting set up to play. You know where I'm headed with this, I think. And so you were having this continual technical issue, just internet, Wi-Fi stuff was just being grumpy. And so you kind of, in this sort of exasperated way, you're like, well, I'm not so sure. And then we went ahead and did this track anyway. And you did it with kind of this weird, it wound up with this very odd mic effect is the end result of this, because you didn't have, things were just not cooperating. It happens. But the interesting thing that occurred was, because of the nature of the song you had chosen to do, it was this older Nat King Cole tune. The sort of sonic anomalies, if you will, unpredictably and unexpectedly, actually made it turn out to be such a more powerful performance than if we had had the pristine, like Bonham saying, you know, even if you'd had the whole big monster setup thing going perfectly and everything else, in a way, it would have taken away from the effectiveness of it. So I guess that's the other, you know, so my question is, first of all, to you, Haley, is if you can remember, and if you can, for a moment, if you can take yourself out of afterwards when we were all just kind of like, oh my goodness, that was like the coolest thing, which then of course changes your opinion of what happened. Can you take yourself just for a moment back in time and describe kind of like, what was that like in the moment when you before you actually performed and before you got the response, when you were like, uh-oh, I don't know what's about to happen, but it's not what I thought was gonna happen?
Yeah, so really I was just worried about it like completely cutting out and just like either my video is still there and like my audio is completely gone and it's just all you see is me singing and
Okay.
then you can't hear anything.
Right.
Or my audio would, or my video would completely go out and like audio would be lagging, or I was just worried that it was gonna like sound or look absolutely horrible. And I was really nervous for that performance because
No, I know you were. I know. You can see it in your face.
I was
Even through, if you go back and look at the, because we have it obviously up on the YouTube channel, there is a, you know, for those of us who know you, there is a little bit of a facial expression where you're kind of like, I'm singing, but I'm not sure what's happening. And I guess somebody will tell me if this is a total train wreck. So
that's why I always got the live streams running on my phone so I can like watch it while I'm
that's
also
probably, yeah, that's not a bad
like,
idea. I
just
have
to
them
make sure
in the
something
background.
happens.
Sure.
Yeah.
And when someone's, I mean, you can't control. I guess the other question I have though, Haley, is without sounding, I don't want to, you know, don't do the eye roll thing at me when I say this, but you have such a wonderful voice, I think, and not, you have no ego about it. It's not that. But did that, like, sometimes I feel like for performers who have a really good sense of their instrument, whatever the instrument is, you know, does that, like, do you feel like, does that play into when these moments happen that you're kind of like, okay, at least I know I can provide the part that I'm supposed to provide, even with the technical glitch? Because sometimes people are like, especially younger musicians, there's this element of one little thing is out of place and then everything kind of just falls apart. Like it's like a house of cards. And so they don't have quite the control musically, whereas you do have that control musically. Like, I'm wondering if unconsciously, I don't know, I'm curious, like I said, the mindset of what happened during that.
I'm not quite sure if I understand exactly what you're trying to say.
Okay, let me rephrase it then. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase it. I'm sorry. I'll try to simplify it. That's my fault. I'm so sorry. In the midst of worrying about how it was going to appear, did you have any concerns though about your actual ability to still perform well?
I don't, you guys probably couldn't see it, but I was panicking like almost the entire performance. Like in my head, I was like, oh my goodness, what is happening? So I honestly was not expecting it to turn out as well.
Sure. But I mean more specifically, like your voice. Were you worried? I understand, like I said, you know, you were worried about the video might cut out, the audio might cut out, but those are technical things beyond your control. I'm saying,
Yeah.
in the midst of all that, are you also thinking to yourself, oh man, now I can't sing well because I'm not comfortable or I'm not sure? Like, was it affecting your ability to actually perform?
Well, I think mentally I was yes and no. I was worried that my panicking was gonna make me like pitch wrong or like mess up the words
Okay.
or something like that. But like at the same time I was like, okay, I can do this. I
Right. Okay.
like yes and no.
That's fair, and there's no right or wrong. I was just curious because like Jesus, so literally just this week, between yesterday and today, you had a similar moment. It was in class, I'll grant you, and we're gonna get that track up on one of our shows because it's too freaking cool not to. But so my recollection is yesterday we're sharing ideas in class. And you, I mean, and you're new to the program and stuff, and Lord knows there's you know, of all the times to join this program that's already kind of outside of any box, or we don't even know where the box is anymore sometimes. And you were just like, I want to share something, and I just haven't quite gotten used to how do I do that in Zoom. And so then we had this whole issue of trying to get your track to be able to be shared with the class. It wasn't for a grade, it wasn't for a performance as such. It was just to get some feedback, and we couldn't get it to happen yesterday. So we went in and, you know, we talked about a couple of possibilities and we troubleshot some things and blah, 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 blah. And this morning you had gone in, adjusted those things, and we got to hear it and it worked perfectly. But it was interesting on my end and granted, I'm just looking at a little, you know, screen, you know, a letterbox screen that I've got for your camera, but I could see your entire physical demeanor change completely from yesterday's frustration to today's, I don't know, moment of victory. I'm not sure what the descriptor is. But did it like I'm wondering, like, was there a moment where you were like, I can't share this thing, you know what, it's probably not even that good anyway? Like did it trigger any kind of like moments of self-doubt where you're like, you know what, maybe it's just as well, I'm getting aggravated now, I'm not even sure if what I did is worth the hassle?
Yeah, I was like, if this doesn't work today, like the last time we had class together, I was like, then it's just not meant to be, and like I'm just not gonna like deal with it. I'm just gonna like probably do another whole like thingy, because I was working like that project that I showed you today. I was working through it the entire time when I said I'm gonna work on my own.
Right.
Song, and then I was like, because I can't do anything like 50%. I gotta do everything like 100% or as much as I can. Because I did not want to show you anything that was like
right. Isn't that funny how sometimes that's a blessing and sometimes that's a curse?
Yeah. It's kind of like
an experience that's cursed a lot more.
Yeah.
Just like
this is not the group to bring. This is probably not the group to be talking about that.
No.
You guys are like,
literally all of us in here are like to the T perfectionists.
Yes.
All or nothing.
Well, I mean, it depends on who I'm showing it to 50% done. There's certain like people that I would feel more comfortable seeing my rough draft first than my final draft, you know?
Well, for me, it's not even like the rough draft. It's just like, well, I got this thing and like, I'm not going to make sure that it kind of works. You know, it's like, it's gonna work. That's like when I go on stage, it's like, why do I set my drum set up the same time when I perform, but in my room it's different every single day? Like, because I know one way works and I know it's not gonna be, you know, 50% of what I can do because this one way works. Same thing with guitar players, like using the same strings for 20 years. Like, why? Because it's like 100% know that's
sure,
like,
but isn't there also an issue of circumstance though? I mean, like I wonder, and I get it. I'm you know, ancient at this point by comparison, but I still struggle with this of like, isn't there like a like have you ever had that moment though where you have something that's not quite there, and then somebody, like, you'll play it for somebody in that unfinished phase, and they'll give you some comment or some suggestion or some remark that all of a sudden everything else just kind of like it's like one of those weird, like, just, it just locks in all of a sudden, like all of a sudden you see the puzzle for what it was supposed to be,
Totally.
and you see
Yeah.
all the pieces, and then you're just like, okay, I'll do this, I got it, it's even better.
That's how inspiration works.
Well, sure, but I guess what I'm saying is though, your sense of need of perfection is not a bad thing. The higher, high quality is always good. You want to do your best, of course you do. But I also wonder though if sometimes you can miss the forest for the trees. I have a problem with this. I mean, I have a project that I have been working on literally for the better part of 15 years in various
Just the
stages.
pedals.
Is the pedals
It's
The pedals.
well, but it's part
that
of it.
you
I
were
mean, it's-
literally working on today, right before this?
Well, yeah, but that's because I'm all. Well, some of that's because I'm always working on it. But there's an underlying theory behind it, and I don't want to take up your podcast on my silly projects. But my point is just that I do
You should
know
do a whole
that,
thing on Maxwell's Frankenstein of
You
Lego board.
should.
Yeah.
That's actually not a bad idea.
We'll see. We'll see. I think no one's really that interested in this. I think they're more interested in you guys. But be that as it may,
Nah.
my point is just this: what I even have learned, in all seriousness, is that there is a value, and I don't take advantage of it enough. But there is a value in, okay, here's where the thing is, whatever the project is, but here's the state it's in. Presenting that to at least some people as like a marker, it does something for like a marker in time, because otherwise these things kind of just can go on and on. It says the guy with the 15-year timeline, I realize, but it's kind of like what Bonham said though, because the other end of it is you set the thing aside or you're not satisfied, and then you run the risk of forgetting about it, which may be okay. I mean, who knows what's right or wrong in that scenario, but I don't know. I guess you get to a point where you start to wonder about the what ifs, and you don't want to have a lot of those. At some point, you don't want to be going, well, what if I had only, or if I,
Well,
should I
like,
have?
I know some bands. I mean, here's an example. I talk about this band so much, but like Periphery,
I know it. I knew it was gonna be Periphery.
they have a song on their newest album called Satellites
Right.
that one of their guitar players, Mark Holcomb, wrote.
Mhm.
Mark Holcomb wrote that song for his like first band that he was in, and like before he was in Periphery, and it was like on one of their like EPs. And then he presented that song. He's like, "Can we use this for Periphery?" in like 2012, and they were like, "It's okay. We have
Right.
better material to put on this album." And then their singer, like 8 years later, was like, "Hey, this song's pretty cool. Like, do you remember this song, Satellites?" And they were like, and their guitar player's like, "I told you 15 years ago that, not 15, I told you 8 years ago that song was awesome. You guys didn't believe me." Like, even if it sits aside for a long time, as long as you keep it around. Like, I know in my computer, I have a folder of probably like 40, 50 half done songs that
Mhm.
like I know one day when I'm just, because very frequently I'll just scroll through and be like, what sounds cool? Like, what can I do something with? And I'm like, oh, this one riff, like 3 minutes into this 5-minute song, like this one little thing I did would be cool as it's like its own thing. So you can, even if you like abandon a project, as long as you keep it around, it could still be useful to you.
Sure.
Even if in its original form it never came to fruition, you could still
Right,
always
right,
use
right.
it.
Well, I mean, I can do you one better, because I'll talk about a band that I always talk about, and it's a good example of this too, which is Queen. On Queen 1 and Queen 2, there's a song that happens on both albums. And the version of it on the first album is cool. And then for whatever reason, and I've never bothered to go in and research it, on Queen 2, or maybe it's the deluxe edition, so maybe I'm getting the album releases messed up, but I'm pretty sure it's Seven Seas of Rye, I think. And it's like there's one version of it on the first Queen album, and then there's another version that is like the version everybody knows. But they actually not only went back into it, they re-released it, which is, it's funny because I can't think of a lot of artists doing that now. Like, there's this weird sense of everything's got to be new and everything's got to,
I
change. And
love
of
it when
course,
bands do that. Like Like when Kiss did their most recent greatest hits album, they went back into the studio and re-recorded all those songs instead of
Just the
just
old.
just remastering the old tapes or whatever, making it sound better.
And
They went and re-recorded everything so it's like the way they play it now compared to how they played it
sure.
30 years ago.
Well, and some of that also might be in their case, and whether you're a fan of Kiss or not, or which version of Kiss you are a fan. I mean, there's a whole that band alone is like a graduate level like study in some cases. I mean, and in
Then
some
I
really
got my
cool ways too.
PhD.
But yeah, but what I was gonna say is, I can see some of that also being kind of like a, okay, this song is 30 plus years old. We can still do it credibly now, like almost like proving it, because that's one of the things that happens. There was a weird Paul McCartney did some big show a few years ago, and I think he just wasn't feeling good or whatever, and a lot of people were criticizing that he had, you know, somehow lost his upper vocal range. And then he goes out on tour, and you got the strong sensation that, or the strong suspicion that he must have read a bunch of those reviews.
And tried
He
extra
went out on
hard.
tour doing these like 3.5 hour concerts every night, and everything was, he was pushing that upper range and nailing it every night, as almost to say, you know, give me a break. I just had one bad night. I can still do this. And I mean, but you can kind of see, I mean, there's, you know, there's a competitive nature to all of this. There's certainly a trying to keep up with the Joneses, as they say, kind of thing, even for classic. I mean, you know, to me, that the most interesting part about that is, if Paul McCartney on some level still has to prove things,
I think he was proving it to himself more.
that
You
might
know,
be
because
true.
I mean, I know for me, like I've had a
Yeah, I
bad
could
performance or two, and every single time I'm like, yeah, like let's say I botch a drum fill or something, I'm just like, damn, I really hope nobody notices that. And then somebody was like, you really messed up that drum fill, didn't you? And I'm like, damn, somebody
Great.
noticed that.
Right.
And so what do? I go home, I cry about it, and then I go to bed, and then I wake up the next morning, and then I practice literally that drum fill for 3 hours. And then I make sure every time I play it from then on, I don't mess it up.
Right. And sometimes, you know, I mean, I would argue that on some level, it's important to make mistakes early on, because the longer you wait to have some kind of like failure or some kind of issue, the worse it is to recover, the harder it is, I should say, to recover from it. And the idea that you won't ever have them.
Well,
I remember,
respect to Paul McCartney real quick,
well,
because he could have just been like, I'm old.
oh
And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
like he
Well,
could have
and that
just
was,
pulled that card, but instead he decided to be like, I will improve on
and
myself,
and
even
I,
though I've been doing this for 50
yes,
years.
I think you're 100% correct. And I think that's the other reason why he's Paul McCartney and the rest of us aren't. Because
Exactly. Yeah.
even at his level of accomplishment, he was like, yeah, that's not acceptable. And I could phone this in, and I'd still be playing in front of stadiums just off of the Beatles and my own name and Wings and everything else I've done. But that's not good. Like it's interesting to me when somebody of that caliber
It's self pride.
but he sets the bar so high that you kind of
Like,
have to go, well, now I have to be like on my A game that much, because the guy who no longer even has anything to prove, if he's still on his A game. Now, granted, his like F game is everybody else's A game. I personally believe that's a separate part of it.
even now.
Let me. I want to go back to Jesus for something really quick. I'm curious about, and part of this is because I'm still getting to know you. I mean, we're in first quarter of this whole weird thing. Do you perceive the music that you're making as only for studio work, or do you, like, when you're writing it, do you see it as like, I'm gonna play this live too?
Oh yeah, I see it as like maybe one day if I like ever go on tour, I'll play that, perform the hell out of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, can we start a little? I mean, it's not as grandiose or maybe as exciting, but I'd love to see those performances at least start happening with us. Maybe not on a world tour, but you never know.
I've never
course.
once written a song and said, I will never play this live.
Yeah, but there's a difference, because I think drummers inherently think in terms of audience because of the nature
Well,
of the instrument.
I was just about to say that, and I always grew up wanting to be the live guy, not the studio guy.
Sure.
So there has never been like a song or a thing I've ever done where I'm like, I want to play that in front of 20,000 people, and sometimes I'm like, damn, how would people react to, like, in the crowd react to this? Like,
Sure. Well,
like
but that's
this is
good.
cool. It's like super odd time
Right.
signatures, and like people sitting in their bedroom would think it's awesome. But like, if I played this in front of people, would they like, would they like, I think of mundane, like, people who don't really, they're not really into music like as much as, you know, maybe we are. Everybody in this group, I could write something, we would all appreciate it because how technical it is or how great it sounds or the music theory behind it. But maybe somebody who's like, they were never even in band class when they were a kid, like,
Right.
are like, hey, that song's pretty cool. Like, that's what I try to strive for when writing
Well,
for
and that's good
myself.
too, because there, you know, I think you need a mix of both. I think you need things that are interesting to you, but you also need stuff that appeals to people. There was I was listening to a rebroadcast of a show that was talking about just after Tom Petty had died, and one of the people was commenting on the fact that, you know, here's a guy who literally, once the world found him, he seemed to consistently produce radio hits, even though he was like, it would be this weird thing where it'd be like the dude who's 20 or in some cases 30 years older than the rest of the charts was still on the, and what they were boiling it down to was that part of it was just, you know, his just natural sort of abilities, but also just specifically that it's like you write music that works on multiple levels and is, so as somebody put it, deceptively simple. Like Tom Petty songs are a great example of this. They sound and seem really kind of just
They're very
thrown together
palatable.
almost. Yeah. And then you try to play them and to get the nuanced kind of feel and vibe of them. It reminds me a little bit of like the band and like you know, like songs from Big Pink is their classic album, but like those songs, if you listen to them on one level, seem incredibly simple. And then you sit down, like, I mean, Bonham, for you, sit down and try to play like Levon Helm. It's hard. Like none of his
Man,
stuff is
some
complicated,
people some people are
but
like, Phil Rudd plays very simple beats, and I'm like, are you sure about that?
so okay, so let me ask you this. I want to, and I know we're kind of running out of time, but I want to kind of go around here because I have another question too. Well, a related question. So Jaden, like, and the wall behind you is sort of like a perfect example of this, even though it doesn't even remotely represent all the instruments you play because we don't see the handpan, the didgeridoo. I'm assuming there's like 50 other things that are, you know, available to you.
I have too many. It's a
So
problem
here's
at
what I'm
this
wondering.
point.
You are the definition of multi-instrumentalist. And the
Yes.
definition of
A
not
good
just,
multi-instrumentalist.
Oh, I
yeah,
appreciate
not
it.
just dabbling.
Somebody
So
somebody's like me, I'm like, I'm a drummer, but I can like kind of play bass and
nah,
guitar. Like
we're
Jaden's
not
like
even going to go
master
down
at
that.
every
No,
No,
I'm
I don't
not
instrument.
know.
buying that.
I'm not a
I'm not
master
even
either.
going to acknowledge that by no.
Jaden's got that mastery of every instrument. He
Yeah,
doesn't he
you're
doesn't
selling
like we were
yourself short,
saying,
Bonham.
he ain't doing 50% on nothing. He's
Okay.
100%
Well,
going on everything he can do.
Okay, so but
Yeah,
here's my question then to you, Jaden, and Elias, actually any of you this would apply to, but I'm specifically curious as I think about it, the two of you, because you do have such um and I say this in a good way, calm facility and so many instruments. So what I mean by that is you can pick up a large variety of instruments and just go, okay, it calls for this. I'm going to play this. And although you may not get it perfect the first time that you want because of that perfectionist thing we already talked about, you're not hunting for technique, as it were, if you follow me. My question is, wait, are you hunting for technique, Jaden? You sounded
well,
like you were about to
no,
say.
because I was going to say no. That's a good point. Because if anything, technique I feel like is overrated. You know, as
No
long as you can
argument
make
from
it
me.
sound good.
See, I'm a drummer,
Sounds
and like
good.
if you
Yeah.
don't have technique, you will hurt yourself in the instrument that I
Okay, but
play.
that's different though. You
And
know,
like and
But technique for the sake of technique, I think, is maybe more
Right.
what Jaden's talking about.
like
yeah,
the
sitting
way,
down on a guitar and be like, this is how you hold a guitar
yeah, like
perfectly. Like,
that's ridiculous. That's how I
But
was
like
trained for
piano
Yeah.
cello. You know?
positioning,
Yeah.
like keeping your fingers in the right place when you're. That's,
Well, but to be fair,
this is the bury the beater or not argument.
yeah, but to be fair, on any instrument, there is an element of the physical response. There are certain things about the way the instrument will respond if you apply certain techniques in a certain way that will give you better facility. My question has nothing to do with that, though. In all seriousness, what I'm wondering about is, because of the multi-instrumentalist element that you have and that you're capable of, does that I'm going to go back to my original question real quick here as we're getting close to wrapping up. Does that, then I'm going to move to Jesus and Haley for a very specific reason too, but does the multi-instrumentalist ability that you have, does it allow you, when you hit those blocks, do you think that gives you like some additional options before you completely cast it aside? Like, have you ever sat down, like, let's say you're sitting at a piano, and because I know both of you play piano very, very well. I also know both of you play guitar and a whole bunch of other instruments. What I'm wondering is let's say you conceived it as a piano song, just whatever this imaginary piece is. You're going along, you're really invested in it. You hit the wall we talked about. A lot of us, myself included, would probably be like, okay, I'm going to set this aside for a little bit and wait for it to come together in a way that feels viable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever hit that moment and before you set it aside go, okay, I'm going to grab my guitar for a moment and I'm going to see if maybe taking it through on the guitar changes how I'm feeling about it? Hey, nope, it was meant for piano. It's still piano and I'm done.
I mean, it all depends on the song for me. You know, if I'm planning to add instruments, I'll definitely do that. Be like, okay, I guess it does help. You know.
Elias, what about you?
What I do is I won't necessarily if I'm hitting a block with a certain song, I won't necessarily go with a different instrument and try it that way. But what I will do is if I'm doing because I cycle like we were talking about earlier. So if I move on to work on a different song to let the other one rest, I won't work on like if I was working on a piano part on the song I hit a block with, I won't work on the piano part for this other song. I'll work on like the vocals or the guitar or the beat or something, but I won't work on the same instrument because it helps just like give that part of my brain a break. I don't know.
No, that's totally, that makes sense because like every instrument has its own feel to it.
Yeah.
You know,
and I just need to like let that rest for a while.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I got two more quick things. One
it also
for
depends
Jesus.
on the context you're using the instrumentation in.
Yeah, that's
well.
fair.
Yeah.
Well,
Because,
and
like,
actually,
for
funny
me,
enough,
I use a lot of. I like to use layers. So like, I've been working on this piece kind of on the side, which I'm taking like one of those breaks from right now. But there's a guitar riff, and I'm laying under it with the super heavy synth track to like give the guitar riff some like oomph. But like, I can't just kind of like work on the synth track on its own because it's in conjunction with the guitar part.
okay, that makes
So it
sense.
also depends on like the instrumentation.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Speaking of instrumentation, and again, like I said, I because I know we're running out of time here, but I want to kind of cycle through my last two folks here because I'm curious about something. Jesus, so you do a lot of work, I know, in what they call in the box. You're in Logic a lot, using that as a way to produce your music, which is awesome. I'm wondering, do you find yourself like, does changing, say, the sampler or changing the, maybe it's like maybe you're working on like a particular groove and you change out the drum machine that you're using or whatever to create the groove, does that tend to have enough of an impact to lift you over the hurdle, or is it, or do you feel like there's something inherently more like there's a deeper issue that you have to kind of step away usually more?
Is usually if I have like a really good chord on like the piano,
Mm-hmm.
and like I don't like how it sounds, but I like how it's like the way it's played. If I just change it into like a synth or like a bass, that would just make me go into like a whole nother like dimension or like another place where I could like create music. It gets me like motivated.
That's interesting. And so it's interesting to me that, we forget about the fact that although live musicians have a certain advantage over feel, I would argue sometimes over, say, in the box, the folks in the box more have a distinct advantage in that they can kind of with the sort of immediacy go, you know what? Nope. I'm just going to literally take this punk rock tune and I'm going to lift it out of punk rock and I'm going to throw it into the land of, opera. Not that you would do that necessarily. And that's a whole separate conversation about when that's relevant. But I just mean you can much more easily move timbres around. Whereas live musicians, I mean, yeah, you've got effects and yeah, you could pick up like, an acoustic guitar instead of an electric guitar or whatnot. But there is no way that a live musician will be able to access the kind of timbre variations that say a DJ or a producer in that context of the word producer can. I mean, with very limited exceptions. I mean, obviously there's always an exception. Haley, my last
Well, yeah,
question is
like
for you.
section of DI. If you just have the straight direct DI of your guitar and you just change any sample of what you want.
True,
like,
but if you feel like it's not
or if
supposed,
you have
like
drum
suddenly if
triggers
you're like,
on your
you know what,
drums.
yeah, but maybe it's not supposed to be guitars, and maybe it's not supposed to be drums. It's just the like what Jesus is saying. It's just the content of it is right and not the timbre. But that being said, there is a wild animal on Elias's hand. Is that a frog? Okay. Well, there you go. Whoops, he's running away. Haley, here's my
Don't.
question for you, and this is my last question because I know we're coming up on the end of time here, but I'm just curious about one last point from you. So you are an extremely gifted singer, and you have wonderful control over your voice. Looking at this point the other direction, when you're going to sit down and sing a song, do you look at that and say, whether you wrote it or it's a cover, is, you know, whatever, but do you listen to the sound of the backing track or the instruments being played live that are supporting you, whatever it happens to be? How much does that affect how you're going to deliver your vocals versus saying, this is my voice, this is what I do with my voice, and either it fits in this thing or it doesn't? Do you know what I mean? Like where's the pull? Like an instrumentalist has the ability to have a much wider range. A vocalist, no matter how gifted they are, there are certain just timbral elements that are not going, they that's how the human voice works. That's why you sound like you do and I sound like I do and everybody sounds unique. There's only so much modification beyond. We're not going to go into electronics and effects and things. I mean, just your normal voice. Like, do you think about that at all, or do you just kind of let the chips fall where they may?
I'm definitely constantly thinking about my vocal range and how high or low I can go, or do I want to belt here? Can I belt here? Can I go softer here? A lot of the time, backing tracks, it depends on how well, if I'm doing a cover, how like in sync the lyrics are with the backing track. But I'm constantly thinking about my voice, my vocal limits, and what I know I can do with my vocal limits. And I definitely do sometimes try to push my vocal limits, but never want to go too much because harm could happen if you push too much.
Right, of course.
So,
well, and it's good that you're aware of that.
Yeah, but constantly thinking about my vocal limitations and abilities and what I can and can't do.
Interesting. On that note, we are out of time for today's episode. This is so cool. I love these conversations. I really, really do. For those watching, this is why I love this gig so much. And this is honestly, this is just a few folks, and this is kind of all day long what's happening, except we also get the benefit of hearing what's been created and looking at what's being designed and built and all this other stuff. It's just kind of awesome. Anyway, I want to thank Bonham and Jaden and Elias and Haley and Jesus for joining us today. We will be back next Friday with another episode of our podcast with I believe I can make this public now. I think hopefully he will still be able to do it. A very special guest, our new Arcadia principal, Dr. J, is going to join us next week. We have it tentatively penciled in, so hopefully his schedule will still allow for it. Thursday at 2:30. I believe that podcast will happen at 3:30, by the way, not 2:30 next week, but hoping to have a whole bunch of students on there with him. We can just grill him like for hours on end. We won't even let him leave. It'll be awesome. No, he's a really, really cool guy. And has been awesome. Tough gig to come in under these circumstances, but he's been great. He's very supportive of what you guys do. So it'll be fun to talk to him. That's next Friday. Next Thursday, we will have another show, which again have been just fantastic. It'll be at 2:30 here at arcadiacms.com and also on the YouTube channel. and check out the recording archives, check out the music videos. Lots of great stuff happening with all these students, and so much more. And I'm so grateful to everybody for all the support of these wonderful, wonderful young musicians. And thank you all so much. And we will see you next time right here. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody.